Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. I'm going to talk this afternoon about kayanusati, mindfulness directed towards the body, which is a theme the Buddha returned to several times, and he praised it very highly, the body as a vehicle or basis of meditation. For example, in the Satipatthana Sutta, the four foundations of mindfulness, the first one is the body, and it's actually the one to which the most space is devoted in the sutta by far. And the other three are mental factors, feelings, mental objects, and consciousness. The body serves as a vehicle in mindfulness of breathing, for example, which is certainly a very fundamental practice. And the various kinds of vipassana meditation, there is usually a strong component of mindfulness of the body. In the Mahasi method, the initial attention is placed on the breath at the abdomen because this is a simple, repetitive bodily formation where through rising and falling one can perceive impermanence very clearly. The Goenka method is even more strongly oriented to sensations in the body. The entire practice is scanning for sensations in the body. And the Pa'ak method uses as one of its primary vehicles meditation on the four elements, which is also included within the body meditation. So it has a wide range of application, and the body as a vehicle has a number of advantages. For one thing, it's something of all the components of our organism, mental and physical, the body as the physical component, solidly tangible. It's rooted, it's grounded. There are meditations that are entirely mental. The Brahma Viharas, Kasina meditation, meditation on devas. In the list of 40 meditations in the Visuddhimagga, many of them are entirely on the mental plane. But and there's nothing wrong with these meditations, of course. But the problem that can arise if meditation is entirely confined to the mental aggregates is that it's kind of untethered, and the mind has a easy tendency to spin out and get lost in speculation and fantasy and delusion. The body is something real and solid, tangible that has, that has a limitation that keeps you grounded. I think it's also a beneficial quality of the body is that the three characteristics are easily evident in the bodily formation. We have dukkha. The human body is always associated with dukkha. There's always some sensation in the body. It's never free, really, from some degree of discomfort or pain. Impermanence, we can certainly see impermanence of the body with changing and particularly with aging, but just with the constant change and variation in the body day to day, moment by moment. This is evident in the breath. And the not self may be a little harder to see initially, but when the body is closely examined, one doesn't find any self essence in the body. It's just a accumulation of parts and pieces. Of these three characteristics, dukkha has a special connection with the body in that, as any of the three characteristics, when they're taken to perfection, when they're completely penetrated, they become transformed into gateways of liberation. And any one of the three can lead one out of samsara, become a gateway. If that's done through the gateway of dukkha, then this is called being a body witness. Because dukkha is always evident in the body. There's a story in one of the kind of collections of teachings of different masters. So there's a Burmese woman who taught meditation, and one of her favorite kind of teaching tricks was when someone come to see her, she would have them sit in a comfy chair and tell them, make yourself comfortable. Are you completely at ease? You completely comfortable? Oh, yes, yeah. Good, good. Now, don't move a muscle. Then she'd start talking, and it would only be like, at most 5 to 10 minutes, and they'd start fidgeting, cross their legs the other way, or shift onto the other elbow or something, and then she'd jump on them. What are you doing? I told you not to move. But I was uncomfortable. Well, you told me you were perfectly comfortable. Well, I was, but then I wasn't. And it's said in the Abhidhamma teachings that the reason dukkha is not evident is change of postures, which is interesting because the other two characteristics, they're disguised or made unevident to the casual look by more kind of theoretical things. Impermanence is masked by the illusion of continuity, and emptiness or not self is masked by the illusion of compactness, meaning seeing things as discrete entities. So those are kind of like theoretical things, but dukkha is masked by change of postures. Because we fidget, we don't see dukkha. And it's not that dukkha is ended when you change your posture, it's just you have a new constellation of dukkha, and a change is as good as a rest. It seems okay for a few moments, until it becomes evident again. That's a strong reason why beginners in meditation often struggle and have trouble with the body and sitting still, is because they haven't done it before. It's not used to sitting still. Painful sensations arise in the body, and they're used to fidgeting, avoiding it. When you sit still, you have become evident. It becomes evident the dukkha in the body. So the three characteristics are clearly evident in the body, particularly dukkha, but all three of them are approachable through the vehicle of the body. And the body gives us something tangible and limited to ground our meditation on. If the meditation is based on the body, there's less room for spinning off into wild speculation and fantasy. You're grounded in something tangible. I brought down a copy of Majjhima Nikaya here. There's a sutta in Majjhima 119. That's the sutta on the meditation on the body. It's the Kayagata Sati, or mindfulness gone to the body, Kayagata Sati. And I want to just go through a few points in this sutta because it's very, it's probably the best text to go to for this topic. The Buddha begins by saying that mindfulness of the body, when developed and cultivated, is of great fruit and benefit. And then he goes through different related topics. The first thing that the Buddha goes through here is the various kinds of meditation on the body. And this section follows the same sequence as the Satipatthana Sutta. It gives the variations of meditation on the body. And the first one is mindfulness of breathing, which is a body-based meditation. In mindfulness of breathing, you're using a simple, repetitive, naturally peaceful bodily process. And it's a process that is on the borderline between being automatic and voluntary, in that most of the time it's just automatic. You don't have to try to breathe, but you can control the breath. If for some reason you want to hold your breath or to breathe deeply, you can do that with an act of will. So it's something on the borderline between automatic and voluntary. And this is one important point to be learned from mindfulness of breathing, is to be able to be conscious of and watch the breath without controlling it. And some people have a real difficulty with that. I know that's something that comes up with some individuals, not everybody, but some people, when they try to pay attention to their breath, they can't help controlling it. And that's something, if that arises, if that's the difficulty, it's something you really need to work through, because that means you need to learn to let go and just be at peace, and abandon the necessity of being in control all the time. You know? And it does, my observation, it does seem to tend to be people who really want to be in control otherwise, like a type of personality that isn't comfortable with not being in control in their life, that has trouble doing that in mindfulness of breathing. And mindfulness of breathing also is based on the sense of touch. That's the one sense space that we're focusing on in mindfulness of breathing. And that's also quite important to remember. You're not watching the breath or listening to the breath, you're feeling the breath. So that's a very bodily sensation. It's, a purely bodily sense, the sense of touch. In the Abhidhamma, it's stated that of the five physical senses, only the sense of touch can feel pleasure and pain directly. You feel pleasure or pain through the other senses, it's mediated through the mind. You don't actually take pleasure in a pretty sight or pain at something horrible to see. It's the mind feels that, the mental processing feels that. The sense of touch is the only one that is an unmediated, direct pleasure and pain. Then the next meditation directed to the body is the four postures: sitting, standing, walking, and lying down. And we can meditate in any posture. Those are the four kind of traditional postures. But what's meant here particularly is being aware of the position of the body. And this is something that, an aspect of mindfulness that, is not just limited to when you're formally meditating. To be aware of the body and how your posture and how the limbs are arrayed is part of general mindfulness. We know a good posture is very important for health, for example, and also how you present yourself to others. A large part of that is the body language and the posture. And also being mindful of the body and where the limbs are and how they're moving. If one is not aware in that way, then you're always tripping over things or knocking things over and bumping into things, This kind of awkwardness. It comes from a lack of mindfulness of the postures. Psychologists talk about a sense of the body in this way they call, and I'm not sure if I've got the right pronunciation, proprioceptive, I think it is. But you're aware of where your arms and legs are, for example. It's not exactly the same thing as a sense of touch, but you've got an internal knowledge of where your limbs are. This is a type of sense. Then the next one is full awareness in meaning and activity, and it gives this is the same text as in the Satipatthana Sutta. It gives a kind of set of examples. A bhikkhu is one who acts in full awareness when going forward and returning, who acts in full awareness when looking ahead and looking away, acts in full awareness when flexing or extending the limbs, who acts in full awareness when wearing the robe and carrying his outer robe and bowl, who acts in full awareness when eating, drinking, consuming food, and tasting, who acts in full awareness when defecating or urinating, who acts in full awareness when walking, standing, sitting, falling asleep, waking up, talking, and keeping silent. So in all activities of daily life, one's aware of what one is doing. That's a aspect of mindfulness of the body. And I like how the Buddha always keeps it real. He includes urinating and defecating in the list. Everything you're doing throughout the day, you can take it as vehicles for mindfulness. The next one is the meditation on the parts of the body, the 32 parts or 31 parts, depending on the version, which is a way of mentally dissecting the body. This overcomes this illusion of compactness. So this is a way of seeing the non-self nature of the body by breaking it up, just like Melinda's chariot. And one goes through the list in the forward direction and then in the reverse direction. And you can carry on the meditation after doing that as a preparatory exercise. If you take any one bodily part that's easy to visualize, then you can use it as a samatha practice and develop it to jhana. The list is hair of the head, hair of the body, nails, teeth, skin. And those first 5 are the external signs. They're the only bodily parts in the list that are visible to the naked eye in a normal situation. And that's also, incidentally, those first 5 is part of the formal ordination ceremony for a new novice, is that they're given that as their first meditation to do, those first 5 aspects. Then we get into internal parts, both solid and liquid. Sinews, bones, bone marrow, kidney, heart, liver, diaphragm, spleen, lungs, large intestine, small intestine, contents of the stomach, feces, bile, phlegm, pus, blood, sweat, fat, tears, grease, spittle, snot, oil of the joints, and urine. And that's 31 parts. And then the Visuddhimagga added 32 parts, added brain to the list. Brain wasn't included in the original 32. It's just a kind of side note that I always find curious. The Visuddhimagga, which was written about a 5th century AD, so about 1,000 years after the Buddha, give or take, he has an extensive, Buddhaghosa is the author, he had an extensive discussion of the 32 parts. For each part he describes the color, the place, and the function. And it was obvious that they had no conception that the brain had any connection to thought or motor control or anything like that. When he talked about the brain, he described it as a kind of marrow that fills the skull of your head. And when you have a cold or flu, it liquefies and drips out of your nose. So obviously they had no conception. But his 32 parts are overcoming the tendency of seeing the body from externalities only. When we look at our own body or someone else's body, we're only seeing really a two-dimensional image on the outside. And the parts that we see are, pleasing to us generally. The skin, eyes, hair. But in the three-dimensional reality of the body, which we attempt to visualize here, it's filled with guts and blood and pus and bones and intestines. It's not sensually pleasing to us. Then the next one is the meditation on the four elements: earth, air, fire, water. Those are components of matter, rupa kanda, or the aggregate of form, and they're the kind of atomic components, you might say, of the body. So it's just another way of dividing up the body to see the elements of earth, air, fire, and water. The Pa'ak method uses the four elements as one of their primary exercises. And there's also I've mentioned, several times before, particularly when we do retreats here, the walking meditation on the four elements, which is described in the commentary to the Satipatthana Sutta. One way of meditating on the four elements is it's very conducive for a walking meditation exercise. Is lifting the foot is fire element, which is energetic. Then moving the foot forward is air element. This air is motion, and moving the foot down is settling is water element, and then pressing it into the earth is earth element. The four elements, I should say, don't take them by their names just naively to be synonymous with ordinary earth, air, fire, water. The names are more like mnemonics. The elements in the ancient Indian system of physics were more like qualities or energies. Fire is heat, energy in general. And air is motion, is that which causes motion. And water is that which takes form. Just as water poured into a container, it assumes the form of the container. So water has this quality of shape. So any material thing has this quality of shape, and that's the flowing out into that. And earth element is solidity. It's defined as impenetrability or the taking up of space. So it's like pretty close to the idea of mass. So there are these four qualities or energies that exist in form material things, and they're present in the body. And it's a way of another way of seeing the body. Then the last one, of terms of the bodily meditations, is the cemetery meditations, or the charnel grounds. In ancient India, they had this institution called charnel grounds, where people who were too poor to afford a proper cremation. To properly cremate a human body consumes a lot of wood. If you're doing it in a wood fire, human body does not burn easily. I've attended a few cremations in Thailand. It takes a lot of firewood to burn up a human body. Except there was this one skinny old guy who was a the story was he was a big alcoholic too. So he went up pretty good, like a good piece of kindling there. But generally, a human body is pretty hard to burn. So a lot of times they would just, instead of burning them, they would just take them out to the charnel ground. It was like an open, they didn't bury them, they would just leave them out on the surface. They'd do some ceremony and then just abandon the body on the ground to be returned to nature that way. And the monks would meditate in the charnel grounds. That was actually a practice in ancient India. And there's still occasionally a version of that done in Asia. Like in Thailand, there's a tradition. Most people are cremated, but if you die by violence, if you die suddenly, but particularly by violence, then they don't cremate the body generally because the idea is if you die real suddenly, you turn into a ghost and you don't know you're dead. And if you burn your body, then the ghost wanders for a long time. But if the body is still present, the ghost will be drawn to it and see himself dead and then pass on and take a proper rebirth. So occasionally the family will donate the body of someone who's died in this way. They'll donate it to a monastery and then it can be used for corpse contemplation. So it's still done to some degree, but it must have been very powerful in ancient India. You go out to the charnel ground and it's just littered with these dead bodies in different states of decay. But you can also do this meditation just mentally, and it goes through a list of the different states of decay of the body. You see a body lying in the charnel ground 1 or 2 or 3 days dead, bloated, livid, and oozing matter. And the bhikkhu compares this same body with it thus. This body, meaning my body, is of the same nature. It will be like that. It is not exempt from that. Again, he sees the corpse thrown aside in the charnel ground, being devoured by crows, hawks, vultures, dogs, various kinds of worms. He sees a corpse in the charnel ground, a skeleton with flesh and blood held together with sinews, a fleshless skeleton smeared with blood held together with sinews, a skeleton without flesh and blood held together with sinews, disconnected bones scattered in all directions. Here a head bone, there a foot bone, there a shin bone, there a thigh bone, there a hip bone, there a backbone, etc. Bhikkhu compares the same body with it thus. This body is of the same nature. It will be like that. He sees a corpse thrown aside on the charnel ground, bones bleached white, the color of shells, bones heaped up more than a year old, bones rotted and crumbled to dust. So if you can do this mentally as a contemplation, to imagine your body decaying through these stages. I've done this as a group meditation, and I had a group of people. One time I was doing this, and told them to close their eyes and imagine themselves in a charnel ground in ancient India, and the family comes in carrying a corpse on a litter and covered in a cloth, and they lay it down and do some chanting, and then they go away, and you go over to the corpse and lift the sheet, and you see it's your face. And somebody went, "Oh!" And then if you go through these stages in this, you see it starts out, very horrible, like a bloated corpse, blue and purple and oozing matter, and then it gets kind of violent with the crows and the jackals and things tearing it apart. Then it gets more and more peaceful, you just, and less kind of horrifying. It just as the decays into dust, and then at the very end there's like a little pile of dust that the wind blows away, and so. You know. So this is a very powerful meditation, actually, and it's something that overcomes sensuality and it overcomes the sense of attachment to the body. There's a story in the Vinaya about a famous courtesan died, and Ampabali, the famous courtesan that Magadha and Kosala, the two kingdoms, both competed with each other to get her to set up in their kingdom because she was her and her establishment were such a tourist attraction, good for revenue. And when she died, the Buddha told King Pasenadi, don't cremate her right away. Leave her for a couple of weeks, and then put her in a cart and parade her through the street. And somebody was yelling out as they took this cart through the street, um, "Who will pay me 100 kahapanas for this body?" And which is 100 kahapanas is what she used to charge for a night of service. Because no one wanted it. And then 10 kahapanas and all the way down gradually to like a fraction of a cent, a farthing or whatever. And nobody wanted it. Uh, um, then the text goes on to, we've now done the various meditations directly on the body. It goes on to talking about the jhanas, the four jhanas, which of course can be entered through meditation on the body, like the breath meditation. And the similes used for the state of happiness or pleasure experienced in the jhanas in this sequence, which occurs elsewhere in the suttas as well. This is a common sequence when he's talking about the jhanas, are all very bodily related. First jhana, piti and sukha, the sense of well-being and happiness that permeates the body, is compared to having soap powder, which is, I guess, how they used to bathe in ancient India with soap powder. You mix water to it and knead it until you get a consistency, a kind of a ball, a mushy ball of soap. And it said that if this is done well, making the soap ball, then every particle of the soap ball is permeated with water. So is the body permeated everywhere with the feeling of well-being. Then in the second jhana, where piti is stronger, more prominent, predominant factor, is compared to the water in a lake in the hills, and it's in a secluded place, and no streams flow into it, and no rain falls into it, but the water is continually refreshed by an underground spring. And it's like the uprushing of piti in second jhana. And third jhana is compared to a lotus growing in a pond that doesn't break the surface, so that every part from the roots to the petals is permeated with water. So it's like sukha in third jhana. Then fourth jhana, which is based on equanimity, is the only one that of these similes that doesn't reference water. It said it's like a man sitting with a pure white cloth, a very fine fiber of cotton thrown over him, and it's so light and such a refined weave that it clings to every part of his body, covers him completely. It's like the equanimity. Then the Buddha goes to the final section of the sutta. He talks about the benefits of mindfulness of the body. He says, when mindfulness of the body has been repeatedly practiced, developed, cultivated, used as a vehicle, used as a basis, established and consolidated and well undertaken, these 10 benefits may be expected. Just as an aside, this is a very typical sort of motif or genre in Pali writing that's sometimes difficult to translate. Is it a long series of synonyms or near synonyms to express something strongly? So often English isn't as rich in these things as Pali, so sometimes the translators have to struggle a bit to come up with words. So the 10 benefits. One becomes a conqueror of discontent and delight, and discontent does not conquer oneself. One abides overcoming discontent whenever it arises. One becomes a conqueror of fear and dread, and fear and dread do not conquer oneself. One abides overcoming fear and dread whenever they arise. And I'll say that overcoming fear, mindfulness directed toward the body, particularly if you see the not self, emptiness nature of the body, then fear diminishes greatly. Fear comes from the sense of losing something that you have or own, and if you see you have or own nothing, you have nothing to fear. Third one is one bears cold and heat, hunger and thirst, and contact with gadflies, mosquitoes, wind, the sun, creeping things. One endures ill-spoken, unwelcome words, and arisen bodily feelings that are painful, racking, sharp, piercing, disagreeable, distressing, and menacing to life. So you become equanimous in all kinds of difficulties and painful assaults on the body. When you have mindfulness directed towards the body and you see it in its real nature, one obtains at will, without trouble or difficulty, the 4 jhanas that constitute the higher mind and providing a pleasant abiding here and now. Then one wields the various kinds of supernormal powers. Then the supernormal powers, multiplication of the body. Having been one, they become many. Having become many, they become one. They appear and vanish. They go unhindered through walls, through enclosures, through mountains, as though through space. They dive in and out of the earth. They walk on water without sinking. Sitting cross-legged, they travel in space like birds. With their hands, they touch and stroke the sun and moon, so powerful and mighty. They wield bodily mastery even as far as the Brahma world. So, I mean, this is obviously an extreme end of meditative mastery that comes from understanding the nature of, penetrating the nature of reality of the body. It's like, I think this is one of the strongest metaphors in the movie The Matrix, that when they understood they were in the Matrix and they could do all kinds of supernormal powers because they understood the production of reality. A lot of these supernormal powers are described in some more detail in the Visuddhimagga and particular ways of developing them. For example, walking on water comes from mastery of the earth kasina. Because when you have the mastery of the earth kasina, then you want to walk on water, you just make it earth kasina under your feet mentally, like this water is now earth for me. And likewise, walking through walls or solid objects is water casino. As you make the wall into water in your mind, we walk through it. And then the next few are also similar, supernormal powers. With the divine ear element, which is purified and surpasses the human, one hears both kinds of sounds, the divine and the human, those that are near and far away. One understands the minds of other beings, of other persons, having encompassed them with one's own mind. One recollects one's manifold past lives, that is, one birth, two births, three births, etc. With divine eye, which is purified and surpassed the human, one sees beings passing away and reappearing, and one understands how beings pass on according to their actions. And the last one is, by realizing for oneself with direct knowledge, one here and now enters upon and abides in the deliverance of mind and deliverance by wisdom that are taintless with the destruction of the taints. That is arahantship. So by the highest benefit of mindfulness directed towards the body is the entrance into the unconditioned. By completely penetrating the nature of the conditioned, one then can abandon it, transcend it, and experience the unconditioned. And the body is a particularly useful vehicle for understanding the conditionality. Both the body and the mind are conditioned, are samsaric, but the body gives us something really tangible to work with and to penetrate the nature of. Bhikkhus, when mindfulness of the body has been repeatedly practiced, developed, cultivated, used as a vehicle, used as a basis, established, consolidated, and well understood, these 10 benefits may be expected. This is what the Blessed One said. The bhikkhus were satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words. So that was the Buddha's teaching there on mindfulness directed towards the body, different kinds of meditations one can do that are body-based, and the various benefits one can expect from doing mindfulness on the body. And the initial benefits, particularly the freedom from discontent and the freedom from fear. Those are things that are very immediate, tangible, experienceable. And the final benefit is realization of the unconditioned, the highest of all.